Hello everyone, Berthan here with an in-depth guide on Axe. I got Ragnar and Bryn to very high elo in Season 2, playing Axe exclusively. I will be going over each move on Axe, detailing their strengths and weaknesses. Then I will explain the different situations to use them in, and give some overall tips at the end. Neutral Light has medium startup frames, medium active frames, and very long recovery frames. It covers a decent area with decent range and does high damage. Sidelight has medium startup frames, short active frames, and long recovery frames. It covers a decent area with medium range and does low damage. Downlight has short startup frames, short active frames, and very long recovery frames. It covers a decent area with long range and does medium damage. Neutral Air has long startup frames, short active frames, and very long recovery frames. It covers a decent area with decent range and does high damage if hit from the center and low damage if hit from the sides. Both Sider and Downer have very similar stats to Neutral Air in terms of startup, active, and recovery frames. Downer does medium damage unless you hit from the very last frame, then it does low damage, while Sider simply does medium damage. Recovery has very long startup frames, long active frames, and short recovery frames. It covers a large area with decent range and does high damage with earlier hitboxes, and medium damage with later hitboxes. Ground Pound has very long startup frames, very long active frames, and long recovery frames. It covers a huge area with decent range and does high damage. Now that I went over all the Axe moves, let's talk about how to use them effectively in the neutral game, which is the part of the game when neither player has an advantage over the other and are trying to land the first hit onto the enemy. Neutral Light is a great anti-engage move because it hits stacked and has the most active frames out of all the Axe Light attacks. If you notice that the enemy tend to dodge towards you a lot because they have weapons that do well up close, such as katars, swords, and gauntlets, then throwing out this move after they dodge is very effective, unless they use a speed dodge because those have invulnerability frames. But if you don't think they have enough momentum for a speed dodge, then using Neutral Light to intercept them works very well. This happens very often if you corner the enemy, or after you hit them with another move, and they try to dodge towards you after they're hit. Sidelight is a great punish move because of how far it can reach the enemy. The range itself is not very significant, but before starting the attack, the character moves forward a little bit, which lets the sidelight reach very far. Also a decent move to poke enemies with shorter range weapons, because it is one of the quickest and hardest to punish moves, if the enemy doesn't have long range punishes. Sidelight is also the main combo starter for Axe. Sidelight combos into Downlight and all of the air moves. I use Sidelight into Side Air the most because it does the most damage and has the most force, so it has the most killing potential. Sidelight into Neutral Air lets you follow up better though, for potentially more damage. Sidelight into Down Air is very limited, so I don't use it much. Downlight is one of the best anti-air attacks in the game. The diagonal range that it has can beat out most downward attacks, but the range right above the Axe user on Downlight is not that big, which is why it's best to keep the enemy at a diagonal when going for a downlight. The best time for a downlight is pretty much whenever the enemy is in the air. The range of downlight makes it so that it's very rarely contested, and it's a relatively quick move for what it does. So it rarely ever gets punished when used correctly. If the enemy is jumping around you a lot, then just throw this move out a lot, and if they're jumping a bit farther away, use speed dodge cancel into downlight. Whenever I face a good Axe user, I try not to jump too much because downlight simply destroys enemies in the air. Neutral Air is a move that is often reserved for enemies who tend to jump really high, even if they're not right above you, because it has good upward range and hits pretty wide as well. Make sure that the enemy is a decent distance above you or to your side though, because Neutral Air doesn't hit close to the user at all. It has a decent amount of dead zone around the user with no hitboxes. This is one of those moves where you use only when you think the enemy will be above you, otherwise it is pretty easy to punish. But if the enemy does like to jump very high, then this move is practically free to use. It has good range, hits in a wide area, and can move the whole time it's active. Something to keep in mind is that even though it hits in a half circle, the hitboxes in front of you is thicker than the ones in the back, so it is the best to face the enemy when using this move. Sider is a pretty straightforward move. It has pretty wide hitboxes for a side move and decent range. Great for either punishing enemies or covering an enemy's escape route. For example, if an enemy misses a move, but you don't think you can punish the enemy because they'll jump backwards first, then jump forward or speed dodge if you need the distance, and then use Side Air. it will likely hit them if they choose to escape like that, since the side air hitbox is pretty wide. This can also apply for escapes through dodging as well. Something that I see people do a lot which doesn't work that well is trying to space with side air, as in trying to simply outrange enemies with it. This is not that good because the side air doesn't have that much range, so it can be outranged by a lot of weapons, and the axe side air is one of the slowest moves in the game. So if it misses an enemy that is expecting it, then it will be punished very easily. So the side air should be used with consideration for where the enemy will move, rather than trying to catch them where they are. Down air is very similar to the neutral air because it hits in a wide area below you. It also has a decent dead zone around you because it doesn't hit that close to the user. So it is best to hit enemies that are below you or a bit in front of you, because unlike the neutral air, where it has a pretty even semicircle above you, the down air is slightly a bit more in front of you and doesn't end as far behind you. So you definitely want to be facing the enemy when hitting down air. My favorite use for the down air is when the enemy wants to engage through dodges. Simply jump up until their dodge is gone. Beware of speed dodges though, because they can chain those into multiple dodges. Then when it is finished, start falling down and use down air. Also amazing for edge guarding because it covers such a wide area and it has good downward force as well. Recovery is a very strong diagonal move. It has a ton of active frames, so it can catch enemies that tend to dodge really high, or after you send them far up with a signature or a downlight. Whenever I play against enemies who jumps really high all the time, to try and mess my aim up, I just throw out a couple of recoveries and they become less floaty really quickly. It also has really low recovery frames for an air attack, so it is rarely ever punished because you can move so quickly after the hitboxes that surrounds you finishes. Also very good for getting back to the platform, especially if the enemy is choosing to stand at the corner of the platform to edgeguard you. You can just start the recovery at the sidewall where they can't hit you and it will go right through the corner. Do it correctly and you end up a bit above the platform, where it's hard to punish you and you might get some easy damage off as well. Ground Pound is a move that can secure kills off the platform when used knowing that it will hit. For example, you send the enemy really far off the platform with a signature, and they're barely able to recover using all their jumps and dodges. Then you can just stand at the corner and use a Ground Pound when they're close. This blocks their only way to survive with a huge hitbox that lasts even longer than a standard dodge does. The problem with having so much active frames though, is that if you do miss because the enemy has spare jumps or recovery and simply moves out of the way, then you'll be in a very bad situation because you fall down quite far and be the one getting edge guarded instead. So down air tends to be more reliable while edge guarding, but if you know that they can't avoid the Ground Pound, then it will do a better job since it has a lot of active frames. You can also use Ground Pound against enemies that dodge forward a lot because the other air attacks have dead zones while this doesn't. The big amount of active frames will catch them every time, but if they don't dodge forward, then those active frames will make you easy to punish. Overall, a pretty high risk, low reward move. I personally don't use it that much. That covers the neutral game. Now I will go over some tips and tricks to maximize your damage output and minimize the damage that you take. All the air attacks on axe can be steered, so if you miss the enemy, then it's a good idea to move away from them, since you're not limited to moving in a certain direction while doing the air attacks. As I mentioned earlier, sidelight is very quick, so it is hard to punish, while the downlight has pretty short startup frames, which means that if you miss the sidelight, then you can cover yourself with downlight easily if the enemy has short range, because enemies with short range often jump to avoid the sidelight or dodge forward. In both cases, you are able to punish them by going into a quick downlight attack. Against longer range enemies that tend to stay back a bit more, it's a good idea to engage with speed dodge into neutral light or downlight, because they both have less than 10 startup frames, which takes full advantage of invulnerability frames. If the enemy is more grounded, then speed dodge into neutral light is a good way to bypass grounded ranged attacks. If the enemy is jumpy, then speed dodge into downlight can hit them safely from below. All of the axe's air attacks has pretty long startup frames, so before using those moves, you have to think a bit about where the enemy will be. For example, if the enemy is on the ground and you're a single jump height, you might go for a down air, but the enemy jumps backwards in that time it took down air to start up, so side air would have been better. Or maybe the enemy is a single jump height, so you jump into immediate side air, but you miss because the enemy was fast falling, and in the time it took the side air to come out, they're already below you after you hit. So it would have been better to go for a downlight. Neutral air has a lot of advantage frames, meaning you can start attacking before the enemy is out of stun frames, so they can't contest. So if you are able to hit a neutral air sending the enemy not too high above you, then use side air quickly afterwards for a safe follow-up. The same thing applies to neutral neutral light as well, but less so. The advantage frames is a bit less, and neutral light hits the enemy farther away from you at an earlier damage. That's why you can only follow up the neutral light with a chase dodge into side light reliably at white damage without the enemy contesting. But you can still follow up with chase dodge safely after you land a side light, since you still have advantage frames. Most of the time, ground pound will only do 22 damage because it only hits once, but you can make it hit twice and do about 32 damage consistently. You simply have to land the ground pound on an enemy that is on or very close to the ground while facing them. If you have your back on them, then it most likely won't work. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, then please subscribe and consider checking out my other guides. If I don't have a guide on what you're looking for, then tell me in the comments section and I will consider it. And I will see you guys next time.